The scent of pine and wet earth clung to everything in Greystone territory. To the wooden beams of the pack house, to the fur-lined cloaks hanging by the doors, to my own skin no matter how many times I scrubbed it raw. Tonight that scent mixed with something sharper, the metallic tang of anxiety that seemed to seep from every wolf gathered in the great hall. I stood at the very edge of the crowd, my blonde hair braided so tightly it pulled at my scalp. I lived my life in the shadows of the Werewolf Kingdom, a vast territory of dense forests and ancient mountains where the laws of nature were amplified 1,000 times over. This wasn't the human world I'd grown up in before I was brought here. This was something older, something more primal, something that operated on instinct and hierarchy and power. Before we continue, please tell me your name, the city you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel. The forests here were different from any I'd seen before. They were lush, yes, but also eerie in their beauty. The trees grew so tall and thick that even at midday, the forest floor remained in perpetual twilight. Strange flowers bloomed in the darkness, their petals glowing with an otherworldly luminescence. The air itself felt heavy with magic and menace, humming with an energy that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. And everywhere, there were werewolves. They moved through these forests like they owned them because they did. Powerful, confident, dangerous. Even in their human forms, you could see the wolf lurking just beneath the surface. It was in the way they moved, fluid and predatory. It was in their eyes, which flashed gold or silver when their emotions ran high. It was in the raw, magnetic presence they exuded, the kind of presence that made you want to either submit or run. I did neither. I just existed. Quietly, carefully, trying not to draw attention to myself. I lived my life surrounded by the might and power of the Werewolf Kingdom, all while the Alpha King ruled from his high throne, unreachable and untouchable. He was the sun around which this entire world revolved, and I was barely a speck of dust floating in the vastness of space, so far from his light that I might as well not have existed at all. But I saw him. Oh, how I saw him. That was my curse, I suppose. Being invisible to everyone else while being hyper-aware of them. Especially him. No one ever noticed me. I was just there. I spent my days blending into the background, doing the menial tasks that kept the kingdom running but earned no recognition. I cleaned the great halls. I prepared meals in the vast kitchens. I tended to the gardens and carried messages and did 1,000 other small, forgettable things that were necessary but unremarkable. The other werewolves treated me the way you might treat a piece of furniture, useful when needed, ignored the rest of the time. Some were kinder than others, offering brief nods or mumbled thanks. But most looked right through me, their minds already on more important matters, more important people. And every time I saw the Alpha King, a part of me ached. It was a physical sensation, this aching. It started in my chest and radiated outward, filling me with a yearning I couldn't name and didn't want to acknowledge. Because what was the point? I knew I'd never be more than an unnoticed soul to him. I knew that whatever fantasies my traitorous mind conjured up in the dark hours of night were just that, fantasies, with no more substance than morning mist. But I couldn't stop wishing. I couldn't stop hoping that maybe, just maybe, one day he would see me. Really see me. Not as a servant or a human or an insignificant member of his kingdom, but as what? I didn't even know. A woman? A person? Someone worthy of his attention? The rational part of my brain knew how foolish this was. The Alpha King was so far above me in every conceivable way that the distance between us might as well have been infinite. He was powerful beyond measure, commanding respect and fear with equal ease. His word was law. His presence was overwhelming. His very existence seemed to bend reality around him. And me? I was nobody. Nothing. A human woman in a world of supernatural predators, with no power, no status, no special abilities to make me stand out. While I did my best to stay invisible, the Alpha King basked in his power and his glory, and I watched from the sidelines, desperate for just a moment of his attention. Just one look. Just one acknowledgement that I existed. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I told myself to focus on my work, to be grateful for the roof over my head and the food in my belly, to stop these dangerous, pointless fantasies before they consumed me. But the heart doesn't listen to logic, does it? The stark contrast between my quiet life and the Alpha King's powerful existence was never more apparent than during the full moon gatherings. Once a month, the entire pack would assemble in the great clearing deep in the forest, and I would stand at the very edge of the crowd, watching as he presided over his people. He was magnificent. There's no other word for it. Tall and broad-shouldered, with eyes that glowed like molten gold and an aura of command that made even the strongest wolves bow their heads in submission. His voice, when he spoke, resonated through the clearing like thunder, impossible to ignore. I would watch him from my place in the shadows, my heart racing, my palms sweating, feeling things I had no right to feel. And he would look out over his pack, his gaze sweeping across the crowd, and it would pass right over me like I wasn't even there. Because to him, I wasn't. To him, I was nothing. No more than a fleeting thought, an insignificant speck in his world. He didn't even know my name, and I was fine with that, or at least I told myself I was, until everything changed that night. The night it happened started like any other. I had finished my duties in the kitchens and was making my way through the quieter corridors of the palace, lost in my own thoughts. The palace itself was a marvel of architecture, all soaring stone arches and intricate carvings that depicted the history of the werewolf kingdom. Torches flickered in iron sconces along the walls, casting dancing shadows that seemed almost alive. I loved this time of day, when most of the palace's inhabitants were occupied elsewhere, and I could walk these halls without fear of being in someone's way or accidentally drawing unwanted attention. The silence was peaceful, almost meditative. I was thinking about nothing in particular. Maybe what I'd prepare for breakfast the next morning, or whether the rose bushes in the east garden needed more water, when I heard voices coming from one of the side rooms. Normally, I would have simply kept walking. Eavesdropping was dangerous, especially in a place like this where pack politics could be deadly and secrets were guarded jealously. But something made me pause. Maybe it was the urgency in the voices. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was just stupidity. I heard the Alpha King's voice, low and commanding, speaking to someone I couldn't see. My heart immediately started beating faster, the way it always did when he was near. I told myself to keep moving, to mind my own business, to not be an idiot. But I froze instead, my feet refusing to obey my brain's sensible commands. The grand halls of his palace, the strength in his every step, the weight of his dominance, these were things I'd observed from a distance 1,000 times before. He was perfect in every way, and I was just the girl who worked in the shadows, unnoticed by him, until that one night. That one night when everything changed. I don't know what possessed me to push open the door to that room. Curiosity? Recklessness? Some subconscious desire to finally be seen? Whatever it was, I found my hand on the ornate door handle, and before I could think better of it, I was pushing the door open and stepping inside. The room was one of the smaller sitting rooms, furnished with comfortable chairs and a fireplace that cast a warm glow across the space. And there, standing near the window, was the Alpha King. He was alone. The voices I'd heard must have been him speaking to someone who had already left. He had his back to me, looking out at the darkening sky, and for a moment, I just stood there, frozen in the doorway, unable to move or speak or even breathe. He was dressed more casually than usual, without the formal robes and regalia he wore for official functions. Just simple dark clothes that somehow made him look even more imposing. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it. Even from behind, even in this relaxed state, his presence filled the room. I should have left. I should have backed out quietly and pretended I'd never been there. But some invisible force, kept me rooted to the spot. And then he turned around. I didn't see it coming. One moment, I was just standing there in the doorway, lost in my own thoughts, and the next, everything changed. He looked at me, really looked at me. His eyes burned with something I had never seen before. Something that made my breath catch and my heart skip and my entire body flush with heat.
Lust. Desire.
And with it came a loss of control.
I saw it happen in real time.
Saw the moment his carefully maintained composure cracked. His eyes, normally a controlled gold, flared bright and wild. His nostrils flared as he drew in a deep breath. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. And he looked at me like I was the only thing in the entire world. The room seemed to shrink as his gaze locked on mine. The comfortable sitting room suddenly felt tiny, claustrophobic, the air thick and heavy between us. I saw the flicker of something dangerous in his eyes, something raw and primal and barely contained, and for the first time, I felt like I wasn't invisible anymore.
He wanted me,
and that terrified me. Not because I didn't want him. God help me, I did, in ways that made me ashamed and exhilarated in equal measure, but because I had no idea what this meant or what would happen next or how to handle the sheer intensity of his attention. For months, years even, I had yearned for him to see me. And now that he did, now that his full focus was trained on me with an intensity that felt like standing too close to fire, I wanted to run. But I couldn't move, couldn't look away, couldn't do anything but stand there, trembling, as he took a step toward me. Then another. Then another. Each step was deliberate, predatory, like a wolf stalking its prey. And I was the prey, caught in the open with nowhere to hide. My back hit the doorframe as he approached, and I realized distantly that I'd been backing up without even realizing it. He stopped just inches away from me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell his scent, pine and earth and something wild and masculine that made my head spin. Close enough that I had to tilt my head back to look up at him. "Who are you?" His voice was rough, strained, like he was struggling to form words. I opened my mouth to answer, but no sound came out. My throat had gone completely dry. Who was I? I was nobody. I was the invisible girl, the one he'd never noticed before. But standing here now, with his eyes burning into mine, I felt like someone entirely different. Someone important. Someone desired. Someone terrified. He couldn't control it. Neither could I. It was as if his body betrayed him, his lust consumed him, and for the first time, he couldn't push it aside. And me? I was caught in a whirlwind of confusion and desire. Why now? Why me? But I couldn't stop the way my heart raced, the way my body responded to him. This didn't make sense. Nothing about this made any sense. I'd been in his presence before, dozens of times, hundreds of times, always invisible, always unnoticed. What had changed? What was different about this moment that suddenly made me visible to him? I could see the confusion on his face too, mixed with the desire. His brow furrowed as he stared down at me, like he was trying to solve a puzzle he didn't understand. His breathing was heavy, labored, and when he raised one hand toward my face, I could see it trembling. "I don't," he started, his voice trailing off. His hand hovered near my cheek, not quite touching, like he was afraid of what would happen if he made contact. "Why can't I? What are you doing to me?" "Nothing," I whispered, finally finding my voice. It came out breathless, barely audible. "I'm not doing anything." "You must be," he growled, and there was an edge of frustration in his tone, maybe even anger. Not at me, I thought, but at himself, at his own loss of control. "This isn't. I've never." He couldn't even finish a sentence. The Alpha King, who commanded thousands with his words, who ruled an entire kingdom with absolute authority, couldn't string together a coherent thought. And it was because of me. The realization was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. His presence was overwhelming. It felt like the walls were closing in on me, and yet I couldn't pull away. There was no space between us now, just heat and desperation, and an electric tension that seemed to crackle in the air. And the worst part? I didn't want to leave. Not now, not ever. This was wrong. Everything about this was wrong. He was the Alpha King. I was a nobody. This couldn't happen. Shouldn't happen. Would probably end in disaster for both of us. But I couldn't make myself care about any of that. Not with him looking at me like I was precious, like I was necessary, like I was the answer to a question he didn't know he'd been asking. His hand finally made contact with my cheek, and I gasped at the sensation. His palm was warm, rough with calluses, and the touch sent electricity shooting through my entire body. His eyes widened at my reaction, and I saw his pupils dilate even further. "You feel it too," he said, and it wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, tinged with wonder, and something that might have been relief. "This, whatever this is." "I don't know what this is," I managed to say, even though my voice was shaking. "I don't understand." "Neither do I," he interrupted, his thumb brushing across my cheekbone in a gesture that was surprisingly gentle for someone radiating so much barely controlled power. "But I can't. I need." He leaned closer, his face mere inches from mine now, and I could see the internal war raging behind his eyes. The struggle between what he wanted and what he knew he should do. Between desire and duty. Between control and chaos. I held my breath, waiting to see which side would win. The tension between us grew to an unbearable point. Every nerve in my body was on fire. Every sense was heightened to an almost painful degree. I could hear his heartbeat, fast and strong. Could see the pulse jumping in his throat. Could feel the barely restrained power coiled in his muscles, ready to snap. "Tell me to stop," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Tell me to walk away. Tell me this is wrong." It was wrong. We both knew it, but I couldn't make the words come out. Couldn't lie when the truth was written all over my face, in the way my body leaned toward his, in the way my lips parted in anticipation. His other hand came up to frame my face, cradling it like I was something precious and fragile. His eyes searched mine looking for what? Permission? Absolution? Some sign that I was real, and not just a figment of his imagination? "I've ruled this kingdom for 10 years, he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. 10 years of absolute control. I've never lost myself to base desire. Never let my wolf override my human reason. Never wanted anyone the way I want you right now, and I don't even know your name." The confession hung between us, raw and honest and devastating in its vulnerability. "Elena," I whispered. "My name is Elena." "Elena," he repeated, and the way he said it, like a prayer, like a curse, like a promise, made my knees weak. "Elena, I'm going to kiss you now. And once I start, I don't know if I'll be able to stop." It was a warning, a last chance for me to run, to escape, to preserve whatever safety came with invisibility. A final opportunity to go back to my quiet, lonely, safe existence where I was unnoticed and therefore untouchable. I didn't take it. Instead, I did something I'd never done before in my entire life. Something bold and reckless and completely out of character. I rose up on my toes, closing the last few inches between us, and pressed my lips to his. The effect was instantaneous and overwhelming. He made a sound low in his throat, somewhere between a growl and a groan, and his hands tightened on my face. The kiss started gentle, almost questioning, but within seconds it deepened into something fierce and desperate and consuming. I had been kissed before. A few fumbling teenage experiences, a couple of disappointing dates in my early 20s. But this was nothing like those chaste, forgettable encounters. This was being devoured, claimed, possessed. This was fire and hunger and need so intense it bordered on violence. His hands moved from my face to my waist, pulling me flush against him, and I could feel the evidence of his desire pressing against me. Could feel the tremor running through his powerful body as he fought for some measure of control. Could feel my own body responding in ways I didn't fully understand, heat pooling low in my belly, my hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer even as some distant part of my brain screamed that this was dangerous, that I was in over my head, that this couldn't end well. I didn't care. For the first time in my life, I felt truly alive, truly seen, truly wanted. He backed me up against the wall, his body covering mine, his mouth leaving my lips to trail hot kisses down my neck. I arched into him, a sound escaping my throat that I barely recognized as my own, needy, desperate, wanton. Elena. He breathed against my skin, and I felt the scrape of teeth, the flick of tongue, the suction that would definitely leave marks. What are you doing to me? Why can't I stop? Why don't I want to stop? Don't stop, I heard myself say, my voice barely recognizable. Please don't stop. His hands roamed over my body, mapping every curve, every line, like he was trying to memorize me through touch alone. And everywhere he touched felt like it was burning, like his hands were branding me, marking me as his. The rational part of my brain had completely shut down. There was only sensation now. Only feeling. Only this overwhelming, all-consuming need that seemed to have no beginning and no end. He captured my mouth again, kissing me with a desperation that matched my own, and I tasted hunger and desire and something deeper, something that felt almost like recognition. Like on some fundamental level, we knew each other, had always known each other, had been waiting for this moment since the beginning of time. It was insane, impossible, and absolutely, undeniably real. His hands found the hem of my simple dress, the plain, practical clothes I always wore, designed to help me blend in, to make me forgettable, and I felt him hesitate. Felt the tremor run through him as he fought against the urge to rip the fabric away, to claim me completely, to give in to the primal need that was consuming us both. I can't, he said, his forehead dropping to rest against mine, his breathing ragged. I'm losing control. I never lose control. What is this? What are you? Before I could answer, not that I had any answers to give, the door to the room slammed open. The sound was like a gunshot in the tense silence, and we both froze, still tangled together, still breathing hard, the spell between us shattering into a million pieces. Just as he reached for me again, his pack rushed in. The beta, a tall man with silver eyes and an expression of barely concealed shock. Two enforcers, their faces carefully neutral, but their eyes taking in every detail of the scene before them. And an older woman I recognized as one of the council members, her face twisted with disapproval. The moment was gone, shattered in an instant. But I couldn't shake the feeling, the hunger in his eyes. What was he willing to risk for me? What was I willing to risk for him? The Alpha King straightened, stepping back from me, and I watched as he visibly pulled himself together. The loss of control that had been so apparent just seconds ago was tucked away behind a mask of authority and composure. But his eyes still burned when they looked at me, still held that wild, desperate hunger that made my heart race and my body ache. Alpha, the beta said carefully, his gaze flickering between the king and me. The council is waiting. The meeting about the northern border dispute. I'm aware, the Alpha King said, his voice cold and controlled in a way that sent shivers down my spine. This was the voice of a ruler, of someone used to absolute obedience. Not the rough, desperate voice of the man who'd been kissing me senseless just moments ago. I'll be there shortly. Of course, Alpha. But the beta didn't move. None of them did. They stood in the doorway, clearly waiting for something, their presence a barrier between the Alpha King and me, between what had been happening and what should happen next. I felt exposed suddenly, vulnerable, like waking from a dream to find yourself standing naked in the town square. My lips felt swollen from his kisses. My dress was rumpled. My hair had come loose from its simple bun. Everyone in this room could see exactly what had been happening, could probably smell the desire still thick in the air. Shame washed over me, hot and terrible. What had I done? What had I been thinking? I was nobody. He was the Alpha King. This couldn't happen. This couldn't continue. Whatever madness had possessed us both needed to end now, before it went any further, before it caused damage that couldn't be undone. The room seemed to spin. The Alpha King was still looking at me, but now there were others, waiting, watching. The air was thick with unsaid words and unfulfilled desires, and I couldn't help but wonder what would happen if I didn't pull away. But I had to pull away. Had to retreat back into invisibility where I was safe, where I couldn't be hurt, where I didn't yearn for impossible things. I took a step toward the door, intending to slip past the assembled pack members and disappear into the corridors where I belonged. But before I could take another step, the Alpha King's voice stopped me.
stopped me.
Stay. One word. A command. An order from the Alpha King himself. I froze, my body responding to his authority even as my mind screamed at me to run. Alpha, the councilwoman said, her voice sharp with displeasure. Surely you cannot mean to. I said stay, he repeated, his eyes never leaving mine. Elena stays. He'd used my name. In front of his pack, in front of his council, he'd acknowledged me by name. The invisible girl suddenly had an identity, a presence, a claim on the Alpha King's attention that couldn't be dismissed or ignored. The implications of that were staggering, terrifying, exhilarating. We will discuss this later, he said to his beta, finally breaking eye contact with me to look at his assembled pack. All of it. But first, I have a meeting to attend. Elena, you will wait here until I return. Do not leave this room. Do you understand? It wasn't really a question. It was an order wrapped in the thinnest veneer of politeness. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and watched as he strode toward the door. The others parted to let him through, but not before I caught the looks on their faces. Confusion,
Concern.
calculation, and from the councilwoman, undisguised hostility. The Alpha King paused in the doorway, turning back to look at me one more time. The hunger was still there in his eyes, barely banked, and I knew that whatever had started between us tonight wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. Don't leave, he said again, softer this time, almost pleading. Please. And then he was gone, his pack following behind him, leaving me alone in the small sitting room with my racing heart and my trembling hands and my completely upended understanding of my place in this world. I sank into one of the chairs, my legs no longer able to support me, and tried to process what had just happened. Less than an hour ago, I had been invisible, unnoticed. Nobody.
And now?
Now I had been kissed by the Alpha King, claimed by him in front of witnesses, ordered to wait for his return like I was someone important, someone who mattered. The rational part of my brain was screaming warnings. This was dangerous. This was reckless. This was going to end badly for me, for both of us. There were rules in the werewolf kingdom, hierarchies and traditions and expectations that had existed for centuries. And what we'd just done had violated probably all of them. But another part of me, a part one didn't even know existed until tonight, didn't care about the rules or the consequences or the sensible, safe choices I should be making. That part of me was still feeling the ghost of his touch on my skin, still tasting him on my lips, still aching for more. I waited in that room, as he commanded, my thoughts a chaotic whirlwind of desire and fear and confusion. What would happen when he returned? Would he explain what had happened between us? Would he tell me it was a mistake? Would he kiss me again? God help me, I hoped he would kiss me again. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. I could hear the faint sounds of the palace around me, footsteps in distant corridors, muffled voices, the crackling of torches. Normal sounds of a normal evening. But nothing about this was normal anymore. I had been seen. Finally, truly seen. And now that I had tasted what it was like to be visible, to be wanted, to be desired by the most powerful man in the kingdom, I didn't think I could ever go back to being invisible again. Even if it destroyed me. Even if it destroyed us both. The door creaked open, and my heart leaped into my throat. But it wasn't the Alpha King. It was a young Omega, her eyes downcast, carrying a tray with tea and small cakes. The Alpha King requests that you refresh yourself while you wait, she said quietly, setting the tray on the small table beside my chair. He said he will return as soon as he is able. Thank you, I managed to say, and the Omega scurried away like she couldn't get out of the room fast enough. I stared at the tea, steam rising from the delicate cup, and felt the surreal nature of my situation wash over me again. The Alpha King was having refreshments sent to me, was making sure I was comfortable while I waited for him, was treating me like someone worthy of such consideration. What was happening? What had I stumbled into? And more importantly, what happened next? I lifted the teacup with shaking hands and took a sip, trying to calm my frayed nerves. The tea was excellent, perfectly brewed, the kind of quality reserved for important guests and pack members of high rank. Not for invisible servants who usually ate in the kitchens and drank whatever was left over. But I wasn't invisible anymore, was I? The Alpha King had seen me,
Had wanted me.
had lost control because of me. And whatever came next, whatever consequences or complications or chaos resulted from this night, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Nothing would ever be the same again. I just had to wait to find out if that was a blessing or a curse. Or perhaps both at once. The tea grew cold in my hands as I waited, the room growing darker as the fire burned lower, and I wondered what the Alpha King was thinking right now. Was he in his meeting, trying to focus on border disputes and pack politics while his mind was still here, still on me, still burning with the same desperate hunger I felt? Or had he already regained his legendary control, already relegated what happened between us to a momentary lapse in judgment, a mistake that would be corrected and never spoken of again? I didn't know which possibility frightened me more. All I knew was that I was no longer invisible. And in the world of werewolves, where power and hierarchy meant everything, being seen by the Alpha King was either the most wonderful or the most dangerous thing that could possibly happen. I was about to find out which. What will happen between me and the Alpha King? Can he regain control? Or will I be the one to change everything? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Stay tuned for more of this passionate and suspenseful journey.